Dear Leader John Steenhuisen is today in Bruma presenting the party's new economic policy, which is titled Unleashing Enterprise, Growing the Economy and Creating Jobs. According to the official opposition, this is the first comprehensive economic policy since 2014. SABC News reporter Natasha Phiri is there alongside our video journalist Vanessa Langa, who are both covering the story for us. Natasha joins us now live. And of course, Natasha, every organization is presenting their own solutions to our economic woes. Part of what the DA is promising is 2 million jobs.
Definitely, Ayanda. And of course, this actually also emanates from the DA's manifesto, which they held on the 17th of February at the lawns of the Union buildings. And who could forget what the DA had actually promised the people of South Africa, that should they be victorious post the 29 polls, they would be creating 2 million jobs over 5 years. And of course, this briefing is actually meant to delve deeper into those economic policies of the party. You would remember one that we covered extensively as the SABC was converting the social relief of distress grant, I beg your pardon, to job seekers grants. But to talk to us more about this, we're joined by Matt Cuthbert, who's the DA's head of policy. And of course, he'll just elaborate all these economic policies for us. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on SABC News. Of course, these are some of the policies that you touched on earlier on during your manifesto launch, but delve deeper into it, especially for the viewers that are watching you right now.
Sure. Thanks so much, Natasha. And I think you've appropriately captured what we've tried to do today. And that's saying we've taken our manifesto in a very short format, said we're going to create 2 million jobs. Today we are here to flesh it out and to show South Africans exactly how we're going to create those jobs. We are looking at things like making sure that we make it easier to start a small business. So whether that be accessing finance, whether that be actually trying to register your business and actually have the kind of support that you require in order to be able to start a small business. Ultimately, big employers are not going to be able to create all the jobs in this country, and we've got to make it easier for people to start businesses. We also look at stabilizing the fiscus and the financial state of this country. We understand that if things and money is spent on the wrong priorities, then it's not going to contribute towards economic growth and ultimately towards job creation. And we believe it's important to be responsible with the money that we spend, focus on infrastructure development and frontline service delivery. We also know there's been a lot of talk about interfering with the Reserve Bank, and we believe that we need to stop interfering with the Reserve Bank. They're doing a great job. It's now up to National Treasury to complement the efforts of the Reserve Bank and make sure that we have a stable monetary policy environment. We also know that labour reform is really, really needed in this country. We have a number of regulations and legislation which impede young people from actually accessing economic opportunity, and also because unions dominate that space, it makes it very difficult for private businesses to be able to invest and employ people which are so desperately in need of employment. We also know that we need to focus on the basics: water supply, electricity supply, safety, security, to make sure that we have strong industries in this country. It doesn't help if you pick winners or losers or specific legacy companies, which the ANC has done over a number of years, and you expect that that's going to result in economic growth and jobs. Ultimately, what you have is government protecting those particular businesses at the expense of smaller businesses. We also know that we need to use the capacity we have locally to advance our international trading relationships and use those relationships with whomever they may be to make sure that we can leverage them, bring investment into our country, and find new markets for us to be able to export our goods. And yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I also like the fact that you also touched on a very important issue. I mean, we haven't been load shed for a couple of days as a country. And in the words of your leader, John Steenhuisen, he says that there's now load shedding monopoly, where South Africans feel as if, or think as if, everything's fine because we haven't experienced load shedding. But post the polls, that's where the danger is.
Yes, I think most certainly. And I think he captured it quite aptly by saying that the ANC manipulates us. We have been victims of this as ourselves as the DA. Each and every election, the ANC comes around and says the DA is going to take away your grant, which we know is a fundamental untruth. In our party policy, we have committed to that. The same with load shedding. We've been able to reduce 2 stages of load shedding in the city of Cape Town because we focused on the right kind of energy interventions. And we believe that the ANC, in many respects, are not being transparent about the amount of diesel that's being burnt. Whilst I think they acknowledge the advances that have been made by rooftop solar installation, I think that, as we know over history, they've not been the most honest with us, and this is why they were a large subject of the Zondo Commission. And I think that we need to be very, very speculative in thinking that load shedding is going to end. They're planning still to say it's 16. They know that they're trying to keep the lights on because they want to manipulate South Africans.
Lastly, Matt, a lot of South Africans, millions of South Africans actually benefit from the SRD grant. And I know there's a lot of interest, especially when it comes to this policy. Now, you want to turn it into a job seekers grant that will encourage South Africans to actually go look for jobs.
Yes. Ultimately, that's what we want to do. We want people who are wanting to start businesses, people who want to actually get employment and are actively seeking this employment, to actually go out there and use that money to be able to do so. I don't think that you're going to be able to create an ice cream business, as President Cyril Ramaphosa once told us at SONA, but I think you can definitely use that as an enabler to access economic opportunity. And that's why we believe it's important to add that requirement to the SRD grant so that we actively incentivize people to go out and seek work. But it cannot happen in isolation. We need these other policies to be in place so that it's easier to get work as a young person, it's easier to be able to access economic opportunity. And if we simply did that on its own without the broader policy reforms that are required, then it would most probably impede people, and that's not what we want to do. We want to uplift people and allow them to climb up that opportunity ladder.
Matt, thank you so much for your time. Of course, that was the DA's head of policy, Ayanda Matt Cuthbert, and of course that comes out of this briefing where the DA was actually unveiling its economic policies, but also reflecting on other key issues. I mean, tomorrow South Africa celebrates 30 years of its Democracy Freedom Day. And when I asked the DA leader John Steenhuisen what it means, his honest reflections, he tells a story of two tales, or rather in his own words, he equates it to a rugby match, saying that, in a rugby match you have two halves. The first half, which South Africa actually went past 15 years, was actually good, and unfortunately he says that the last 15 years of our country's democracy has actually regressed. The ANC government has done bad, and issues like housing, issues of unemployment has actually exacerbated and have actually gone worse. But of course he says that South Africans could use or should use the 29th of May as an opportunity to actually turn things around by heading to the polls and voting for their party. So interesting reflections coming out of this very briefing. With that said, it's back to you in studio.